The Weekly, hosted by the editors of Pro Builder and Pro Remodeler, starts now.
I'm here for a special segment of The Weekly where we're going to reflect and analyze on a recent change to the style guides for some of the Horizon brands. With all the uncertainty shrouding 2020, one thing that's for sure is that American culture has found itself under the microscope once again. With the ongoing protest months after the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, more people are learning about and confronting the history behind symbols and names that surround us, from Aunt Jemima to the Redskins to the statues of and military bases named after Confederate generals. Through that process, we often uncover new perspectives or reframe past events. Pro Builder, Custom Builder, and Products will be referring to the main bedroom in a home as the primary bedroom rather than the master bedroom, and the master suite as the owner's suite. And the same goes for when they're referring to bathrooms. Pro Remodeler will use primary in place of the word master when referring to the bedrooms or bathrooms, unless we're quoting someone or using language derived from a program like the Cody Awards. So I'm here with Rich Bensaka, editor of Pro Builder, Nigel Maynard, the editor of Products Magazine, and Erica Taylor, director of content for Pro Remodeler. So what were some of the key factors in making the decision to phase out the term master bedroom and master bathroom in your brand style guides? How do you evaluate whether or not you should make such a change, especially when such sensitive topics surround it?
Well, I can just speak for Pro Builder. I think that, in light of the social unrest that we've seen over the last, not just the last few months, but even the last couple of years, I think that, it just seemed like, are we being insensitive? Are we being kind of not hearing what's happening and neglecting a certain part of our audience who may be offended by that term or may interpret it a different way? I think that terms like that, are part of our lexicon. They have been for a long time since I've been writing about housing. And I've never given it much thought, but I'm not the cohort that I think is really necessarily affected by that. So we just thought it was smart, and honestly, we're hoping that we'll change the language of our industry, but honestly, we'll change it in our own publication, and hopefully others will go along. But I didn't see any harm in it, and I really did see harm in allowing it to continue.
So I guess I have a slightly different approach, which is that we also have adopted the term primary bedroom, primary bathroom. And I'm not satisfied with that term because I think that what we would formerly have called the master bedroom is not the primary bedroom. It's probably the largest bedroom. It's a bedroom that probably has a bathroom attached to it. But I would say it is the grandest bedroom in the house. And so primary doesn't necessarily feel like the right word, but I don't think that there is a right word. And I think that given the way that our culture and our society is going, I very much agree with Rich. I'm not the cohort that would be sort of emotionally affected by that terminology. However, I have so much respect for where we are today and where the society is today. The last thing that we want to do is make anyone feel alienated. So until a better term comes along, we're adopting primary, but I'm not a fan of the verbiage.
Yeah, so when it was first posed to me, I didn't answer right away. I started thinking about it. And like you, there are some things that when you hear it, it doesn't offend you, but very often whether or not something offends you doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't change it. And so the term master bedroom didn't offend me, but I'm sure there are people out there who is offended by it. Whether that's a new thing or it has always been there, who knows? But like Rich, I felt like there is no harm in changing it. But I also think that primary bedroom I agree that it's just not a good representation of what that space is at all. So if it's one bedroom, it would be the primary bedroom.
Yeah, I'm not happy with the term either. And what's funny, two things. One, I think that we're so used to calling it the owner suite, and all of our all the people that architects, especially designers, who send us projects, label it as the master suite or the master bathroom or bedroom. But we're supposed to be, word people, and primary is the best we can come up with. I'm a little disappointed in us that that's the best.
Well,
we
it
can
wasn't
do, but-
us. It was the Realtors Association.
Yeah, it was. That's true, and they are not word people.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think owner's suite is a good one. I like that. It's better than primary, I think.
What I
Yeah.
thought was really interesting is I actually looked up the first time in known history that the word was used. I don't know if any of you did this, but apparently it was like in a Sears catalog in like 1928 is when it was coined.
Really?
Yeah, and so 1928 was like well after, the end of slavery in this country, but I still think that it carries that. It's freighted. The word is freighted in a particular way. And so I find it really interesting that I don't believe that whoever coined the term, they did it just to sell houses and make whoever was looking at the house feel super important, is my guess.
Yeah.
That's how it was invented.
Yeah, I'd like to take a look at what a house plan labeled that room before 1928.
Yeah.
If there were any that we could find. I mean, certainly a Sears catalog dating back to the earlier part of that century, and see, just to kind of see what they called it. I mean, or they called it anything, just bedroom one, perhaps. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to do some brainstorming then, or maybe some outreach.
Definitely.
So, what do you all think about that relationship too? That it kind of started in the real estate space, and then has kind of expanded into the builder and remodeler space?
Well, the first thing that occurred to me when I heard about it is, did someone complain, or did they say internally that word is somewhat sensitive, so we should change it? So we should be preemptive and find a change now before it becomes a thing. And so I've never seen a complaint anywhere about the use of that word within real estate. The fact that it started in real estate, it spills over, because ultimately everything is bought and sold with real estate agents. And so it makes sense that eventually it'll filter down to us, for sure.
Yeah, I think you'll see realtors and real estate agents probably put some pressure onto, if not architects, then builders that they work for, that they're selling homes for, to update that language on their plans, on their websites, and in the materials that they have at the sales centers and model homes. Changing the nomenclature when you're speaking, I think, is going to be a much harder challenge. But if they can get that changed, I think you'll start to see that slow evolution to primary, at least among homes that are where realtors have some influence. But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably where it starts. To Nigel's point, I think that's who sells homes, and they're at the front lines more or less in dealing with customers. I haven't heard stories about the complaints about it, but I think they were just trying to play ahead. I guess good for them, but they are a little bit more right at the customer than a builder is, because he employs salespeople who are typically real estate agents or licensed real estate agents. So
I also I don't want to ascribe nefarious motivations to anyone in the real estate industry. I don't know what their motivations were, but I do know that the real estate industry overall doesn't have the clout and the power that it had as recently as a decade ago. There's a variety of things that are eroding a lot of the influence that they have. And it makes me wonder, perhaps this was a way for them to, garner some good press, come out before something becomes a problem, sort of be ahead of the curve. And it's not a bad PR move on their part at all, if that's something that they were thinking about as an organization.
It's a great point, and you're absolutely right. They are being undermined by technology. Zillow, OfferPad, all those different platforms that are basically trying to take business away from them, trying to take market share. So you're right. That's an interesting point.
Do you think there's ever a line about conforming to public opinion? And how does this case differ from those boundaries that you've set for yourself?
It's a slippery slope for sure, because you can't change everything because someone says this offends me. And so, but I think back, as we know, we're all writers and editors. And so language is living. And so the words that we used in 1920 are no longer around. There are things we just don't say in public, or in private. 100 years ago on the news, people were smoking. They called women broads and dames. And I mean, the language used back then, and I read some things and I can't believe they did this. And today, back then it's perfectly normal. Today, if you were to get caught saying a lot of those words, you would be hung out to dry very publicly. At the same time, though, I think we're getting to a point where we're a little too sensitive about some things. But I'm not the one to say, what things people shouldn't or should be sensitive about. I can't. I'm not and who is actually going to be the guardian of what's sensitive language and what's not. But I definitely think that we have to be careful not to rush to change things just because of how it sounds or what's the perception to some people.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is a slippery slope, but I don't feel qualified to be the arbiter of that.
Yeah.
I think that, we can look at some of the terminology that we use. I think, as we edit a story or edit a floor plan or something, and anything that we do, and we take a look and say, is there something potential there? I think it takes an effort to kind of step back and look at that objectively and say, is that something that we need to think about? But that's not going to happen. I don't see it as an effort where we try to examine everything we do at once and then say, well, we need to make these changes. I agree with Nigel. I think that, things do evolve for whatever reason they evolve. How we portray gender roles, how we portray racial differences in advertising, in just general society and culture. So I don't feel particularly bad that we responded to this particular issue in this way. But I do think that, we're not going to fix the world. And I think that we just need to be sensitive to those things as they come up. And if something happens where it becomes obvious that a certain term is offensive to a cohort of our audience, then we'll discuss making it that as well.
I guess my sense of it is something that you touched on earlier, Rich, about does it do harm to make the change? And if something is offensive, as you just said, to a certain cohort, and it does us no harm to make the change, then 100% of the time, I don't see why we wouldn't make the change. However, if it was something that was really baked into the brand and the group of people, the cohort that were offended by it was very, very, very small, I don't know. I mean, it is a slippery slope. And if you try to please all of the people all of the time, it's impossible, And so it's a very, very, I think, critical issue that's coming up again and again in our culture. And I think it needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So besides the term master bedroom, have any of you seen any other cultural shifts or changes in vocabulary in the building or remodeling industries?
I've seen some shifts less in vocabulary and more in processes. For example, you see this especially in the home improvement industry, but also in the design build industry, where they used to require the husband's signature on, say, a design agreement. And many, many, many people were very offended by that. They would say, I live here, I'm perfectly, my husband and I have agreed that, I don't work, my husband works, I'm a stay-at-home mom. We've agreed that I'm empowered to sign a design agreement and to go ahead and move forward with this. How dare you, what kind of patriarchal world do we live in where my husband has to be here to sign it? And so because a lot of people were offended by that, I've seen it handled a few different ways now. And something I've seen is that remodelers will say, if you are on title for the house, you have to sign the agreement. So it's like all title holders. I don't care about your gender. I don't care, you have a stake in this design, and we need you on the contract, which I think is a shift that I actually agree with, because could a remodeler get in trouble if, there's a misunderstanding there. You're kind of going on the word of one person, and it takes the, you need your husband's permission out of it and just makes it about whoever is on title of the house.
Yeah. The only instance I could think of was about a year ago. I got a call from a reporter who was crafting a story that she was going to pitch to the Wall Street Journal. And in fact, I believe has actually successfully done that in the time since. But she was asking me about the use of the word plantation in community naming and master plan community naming or neighborhood naming. And, she had several examples of how that term was used and when it was used by developers or by builders, and was asking me what I thought about it. And, I think that, again, that was a year ago. And I had the same kind of response that I did to master bedroom and master suite, which was, what we've talked about. And but do I think that developers in certain markets are going to change that or alter that? I think only if they see, some sort of backlash in their own communities. I think if in their cities or their metro areas, if there is, some sort of complaint or some sort of, public opinion uprising about the name of that. I know that in Denver is a great example. At Stapleton, which was named after a former mayor of Denver, and was the airport in Denver up until about 25 years ago, and was redeveloped as Stapleton into a master plan community that is just about to close in Denver. These events of the last couple of months have forced Stapleton to change its name to Central Park, which, again, a little bit like master suite versus primary suite or owner suite. You can do that on the signage, and you can do that in your press material, and you can do that in any kind of written thing. But everybody who's bought and lived in Stapleton over the last 20 years probably calls it Stapleton, and don't really know the history of that person who had fairly nefarious past as a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And everybody knew that. Everybody knew that when they named the airport after him, and named Stapleton after him. So that the development after him.
I wonder, in that vein, if people find Plantation Shutter a problem.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, as you were talking, Rich, there's something that came to me. So in architecture, especially old architecture, there is a certain type of beam that they use, especially in New England. Is where you find it mostly. And it's called a gun stock post because it's shaped like the stock of a gun. And so I wonder if you have a group who are pro gun control, if they were to, I don't ever see the word except in very limited cases. It's usually a remodel. But I wonder if, for some reason, that word is used in public documents or marketing material. If a group like that could say, you know what, we're offended by the word gun stock post and we would like you to change it. I wonder if that company or builder or remodeler would say, okay, you know what, you're right, let's change it. It just occurred to me about that. So
it's such an interesting question, because Plantation Shutter and gun stock beam are descriptors, right, of something, whereas this plantation housing development or whatever it is a marketing thing to get people to think, ooh, that's cool, I want to live there. So they have two different functions. I mean, if you go to tour an old plantation and you look at the shutters, that's what they look like. Right. And I believe that there is a difference in a descriptor versus somehow honoring the thing. and I don't know, it may be too subtle of a difference. I don't know, but there seems to be a difference in my mind.
That can happen even in just the kind of historical preservations of actual plantations, where there are some that are super historical and they tell the story of slavery and everything, and then there are some that like sell ice cream and have like activities for the children, and it just like reads very differently depending on which route you go through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can speak for me. I'm not looking to rewrite history. I'm a big history fan, and preserving history and educating people about our history as a country and a society and culture. So, maybe if you literally sugarcoat it, that's kind of getting away from that message. But I think that, to have it as an opportunity for people to learn about how those places functioned and what they were and who was there in their lives there, I think that's valuable. So I don't think it's honoring it. I look at it as educating. So, and preserving a certain amount of history that we need to remind ourselves about. So, yeah, I think you're right. Some of those terms are used as descriptors and again, where's the line? And I'm not necessarily qualified to say, well, there's a line there, or to advise a builder or developer to find a certain line. I'm going to make this case. We're going to write about it. We've done other things like this, not racially or ethnically motivated, but trying to kind of come up with better terms for certain things or different definitions for certain things, like generations. But that's our choice to make, and if our readers follow along, then great.
And then, as my final question, what do you think the role is of journalists in shaping the vocabulary that people use, or is it more that we reflect the words that people are already using?
That's a really great question.
Why don't you take a stab at it all?
Who wants to answer that question?
Well, actually, so personally, I think in terms of setting the tone, I think we're irrelevant now. I think we no longer set the tone. I think what's used on the street ends up becoming the norm. So when the Oxford English Dictionary or some other group starts accepting selfie and emojis and LOL, and I mean, civilization is over. Seriously. I mean, I'm joking, but I'm not, because I think once that language becomes the norm and it filters down to the point where it's acceptable to see it in the New Yorker or the Times or the New York Times or the Washington Post or any other reputable publication, I look at it with dread. I really do. And so I think social media and everything else is now the arbiter of what's going to be accepted, unfortunately.
I always look at everything we do as a reflection of our audience. Who is our audience? What language do they use? What language do they understand? Nomenclature, terminology. I personally like to have a little fun sometimes, but I think I've done it enough that I know where that line is, where I might bring in some more kind of general cultural flavor to it. But really, the point is, everything that we do, it has a goal to get across some information to our readers, and specifically, and so we need to know them and what language they use. And I'm with Nigel generally. I think that I'm a little distressed by some of the casualness and some of the arbitrary, I guess, things that come into our language. But as a journalist for this particular audience, I'm dedicated to kind of knowing that audience well and writing for them.
I guess that I think that it's unavoidable that a journalist, regardless of the discipline that journalist is involved in, shapes public thought or shapes their audience's thought, because there are some things that you choose to report on and other things that you choose not to report on. And just the fact of making that choice introduces a level of bias. So you can't report on everything in the industry. So knowing that, I take my role very, very seriously and try to take my own biases out of the process as much as I possibly can and purely be a reflection of the industry that we serve. And I wish that there was more of that happening in the public mindset, because I do feel that we live in a time that is so polarized, and I do feel that journalism is not immune to that polarization on both sides of the political divide. And so I take my own role as being objective and reflecting the truth as accurately as possible extremely seriously, and I do it now more than ever. So that's what I see journalism as being in our industry.
That's really well put. Thank you, Erica.
Oh gosh, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you all for joining me today. It's been really great to be able to, sit down and chat with you guys about the decisions to change the style guide.
No problem. Glad to do it.